Jose?
Yes, Tammy.
Mike Jennings is in
Oh,
the other attendee list. Oh no,
oh, we just
he
beamed
is.
him up. He's
Okay.
he is up. Okay, so I'm seeing we have Bill Penniman, Tammy, Shane, Rich, Nicola, Moira, Mike, Len, Commissioner Carter's on. Yay, that's a win. Jennifer, Gary, Dennis, David, Chris, Charles Colby, Bruce Ramo. Um, let's just wait another minute or so, and because I know we have community health tonight, probably Michelle's going to be joining in a little bit. Let's give it one or two more
She's
minutes.
logging in now, Jose.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Hello, Jan.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. I just saw you come in. So, um, it's everyone. It's 7:04. Let's get started. Unless I know folks are trickling in. I just saw Michelle join. So let's get started. Good evening, everyone, for joining the Reston Comprehensive Task Force meeting. Let me put up the agenda, but I think we're at meeting 39. But we're gonna find out in just one second. Yep. So, yep, meeting 39. Um,
Oh, that's impressive.
yeah. Thank you, Jan. So let's go over the agenda real quickly, and then we'll see if there's any comments or questions. Just as a reminder, we are live streaming and recording this meeting. Um, so welcome everyone. So just item number 2, I know that we're creeping up on the holidays, so just wanted to kind of put out on the agenda the next couple task force dates. We have our next meeting Tuesday, December 24th, because some of the folks in the task force also participate in Reston Planning and Zoning in that committee. And then we're going to take a little break and then meet the second week of January, Monday, January 10th. And then the the following week is Martin Luther King Jr., which is a holiday on the 17th, Monday the 17th. So we'll meet on that Tuesday. Um, so tonight, I know Michelle is on. We're going to continue the discussion that we had at the previous meeting on community health, but additionally, Jennifer has brought parks and open space, and she sent out materials over the weekend. Um, uh, Before then, I know the supervisor will be joining us. We have other items on the agenda, which is also talking about the process for finalizing task force recommendations. And I know we usually talk about discussion items coming to the next task force meeting. So we kind of listed out some of them. I may be missing one, but these are kind of the remaining topics for initial task force approval. And then we'll take some question and comments, if any, and then we'll have our next meeting on next Tuesday. So let me put up my participant stuff and see if there's any questions from the task force on the agenda tonight. And please feel free to unmute if you have questions, because Trying to look at the list, and there's a lot of folks on this panelist tonight.
Jose,
Yes, Lynn.
I would just like to bring the task force up to date with where we are with land use.
Please do, Lynn.
We had received a plethora of edits at my request. So I wanted to thank everyone for submitting comments and edits to the actual document. So this past Friday, we finally got through all of the edits, the line by line edits. And we've also created a different document where we've aggregated all of the comments that we had received from the commentors. And that is a separate table because it wasn't really pertinent to the line by line. So that is also complete. So we are now in the process of really kind of cleaning up the document and waiting for the inputs that are necessary from the other chapters. So thank you. That's my update.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other questions or comments from the task force on the agenda? Okay, hearing and seeing no one, let's continue with the task force discussion that we ended on last week. Michelle, did you need us to put up the document, or would you like us to give you the presenter role?
I think if you could give me the presenter role, I can bring it up. That might be the
I'd be
best
happy
way.
to. Give me 1 second. Okay, Michelle, you should be able to share your content whenever you.
Okay, just give me one moment to pull it up. Make sure I have the most up to date. Okay, can everyone see it?
If you could make it bigger, that would be great.
Full screen. How's that?
Thank you
That's
very
good.
much.
Okay, great. Okay, let's see. So I've not received any written comments, but I do want to perhaps then I think highlight one thing that I didn't cover last time, but that was included in the draft that you all received. So
excuse me, Michelle, this is Mike Jennings. I definitely provided written comments in the middle of October for you.
you did provide previous written comments. Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
I meant to the draft that I sent around.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. So under interwoven equity, what I've also added is I just expanded on the topic of interwoven equity, and I think this also touches on some of what we talked about last week as well. While yes, it's true, many people in Reston do have you know
Michelle, I think we lost your audio.
Looks like maybe her power went out or something.
Well, I lived down the street and my power didn't go out.
I think Michelle is back.
Her name still appears as being on here.
oh, Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, apologies for that. I don't know why, but my computer just went black. So that's always fun. All right, let's try this again, shall we? So I expanded in the interwoven equity concept and just highlighted the fact that while yes, there are census tracts in Reston that would be considered, healthy places and score higher, although not as high as places like Tyson's and McLean on the Virginia Healthy Places Index. We also have a number of census tracts that do not share that same experience. And so I think that's important to highlight, both, as we're talking about this, to make sure that, even though it's our experience, it might not be everyone's. But especially if we look just at one census tract, I believe it is 4823.01, where we have 40 that has a higher HPI, but then just one over, we have issues where 27% of the residents lack health insurance, and their Healthy Places Index is only 48.6. So I think it's important to highlight, because the notion that access is shared by all, I don't think that that's true. I think this also plays into the notion too that, when we say we need more affordable care, you may be able to drive elsewhere, but not everyone can. And so that's a reason to make sure that we have that within the community, especially if one of our goals is to reduce car trips. It's to reduce, using a car. It's to make a more complete community. We have to be able to access quality, high value healthcare within Reston. So let's see. One of the questions that had also come up previously was, well, I don't know, that we would know what's needed. Well, thankfully, there is information out there on exactly what is needed in Reston. And so that is what this is based on. And one of the things is, actually, is a condition of its tax exempt status. ANOVA has to do a community health assessment ever so often. And so, they don't have one specifically for Reston, but looking at the one that they've done for Fairfax and Fair Oaks, that covers the Reston market. Additionally, I've spoken with, as I mentioned previously, folks from county staff and other agencies on what is needed. And so that's how these recommendations came about. So let's see. So that is my, that's what I'm adding here, just that wasn't there when we spoke last week. And so I guess it's somewhat similar to the email that Jen sent around, I think the question would be, are there more high level or conceptual issues that people have and edits that they would like to see made? And so I'm really just now opening it up for comment and edit.
Michelle, this is Tam.
Hi, Tammy.
Hey, so I assume you want these suggestions in writing and sent to you, and then you will answer them sometime after the new year. Is that how you want to handle the edits or the suggestions, comments?
I think we can do it that way. Alternatively, does anyone have major edits that they need to see or that they want discussed right now? Otherwise,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Michelle, this is David Gill. I'm just asking, how much has ANOVA and HCA had a chance to look at these two things?
We reached out to HCA previously and did not hear from them. And then we've not spoken with ANOVA. Their county staff was trying to get us the right contact there.
So I know Dave.
Can I add to Michelle's comment there? with HCA, it's been multiple contacts, and they have been talked to and swore they would get back to us, including hospital expansion and so forth. So I will be seeing them a number of times this week on my own issues, and I'm going to try and make sure they respond finally.
No, I appreciate that, and I do know some potential contacts that I know Michelle, and I'll try and link you guys up.
We have pretty senior ones that are not.
Then you're ahead of me probably on
Michelle, this is David Vanel. You mentioned that you, I think you meant that you had read and incorporated Inova's periodic report about what is needed in Reston or the Reston area, and I assume that's reflected in your current text. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And could you tease out some of the details of that, just verbally for the benefit of the group?
I mean, it's in that. That's what I've based the text on. I'm happy to send the original documents. Perhaps that's the best way to do it.
No, I don't think the original document. I mean, I think your rendition of that's probably perfectly fine. So, I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, what did Inova say was needed in the Reston area or in Reston itself? Increased number of physicians or increased number of locations, more technology? What was their weigh in on this?
So it's hard to. Why don't I just send it around if you don't think that this is, if this isn't what you want, I'm happy to send that around. But it was talking about, it's more of a survey of community needs. And so affordability was high, affordable housing was high as well. There was also a focus on more behavioral health and substance abuse. And I'm sorry, I'm just not going to remember it verbatim what was in there.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle, we do have two other hands, Mike Jennings and Bill Penniman.
Okay.
Mike, did you want to go?
Sure, I can go. Hi, Michelle. I'm just curious. I compared the comments that I sent to the document, and some things were accepted, I guess is the way to put it, in looking at Microsoft Word, and others were not. What's your process? Or I didn't hear back on why things were just left the way they were or not deleted.
Do you want to bring up specific ones? Happy to discuss it.
Sure. Under healthy and active living section, in the, I don't know, the development applicants, it's sort of maybe 2/3 of the way down on that. I only have the October one in front of me where my comments were in there. Development applicants should support efforts that encourage the reporting of pedestrian and bicycle incidents. I wasn't sure how that was going to happen. And the 2 bullets below that, mixed-use development applications close to Metro must include access to public restrooms, and then development proffers must contribute to the maintenance and further improvement. I had comments on that I said, I don't think public restrooms are a property owner's responsibility. That should be Metro. And then the proffers in terms of maintenance improvement of the Reston path system, I felt that didn't need to be in there and that we should focus on getting in terms of RA.
So let's start with the last one. That has not been occurring to date. And so now we're in a situation where they're not joining RA and not enough has been done. So I think we've come to a point where we have to just say, this is not going to happen. We have to have a way that they can at least help contribute to the publicly available and used facilities so that it doesn't all fall on RA members to cover those costs.
I guess I was hoping that in this, this revision of the comp plan that we might make being part of Reston Association, that wherever that falls in the document, firmer, so that when I'm in P&Z, I can say, sorry, you're not part of ARA, you need to be part of RA.
I mean, it hasn't been enforced. It's been asked and then ignored, and oh, we're discussing it, and they move on. I don't know that
because right now it's not required. It's not required. If I'm just hoping that maybe this, right?
I think it is. There is in some.
It's on page 5 of the current. It's on page 5 of the current comp plan.
Yeah. So
I don't think there's any stronger language that we could put in a comp plan, but I would defer to Walter and them on that.
I don't think in the former RCIG between Sunset Hills and Sunrise Valley that it's required. Mark Looney, I mean, you guys know.
So when the RCIG was dissolved, there was no replacement association substituted. And so those areas fall not within or fall outside of both the RA and the Reston Town Center Association.
Right.
For all purposes. And, you know, in fairness, there's been conversations about whether any of those areas should contribute, and some have elected to participate, particularly townhouse communities that or condo communities that otherwise wouldn't have access to recreation facilities, such as the Sspa development off of Sunrise Valley Drive. My understanding is they joined RA. I think Pulte's project off of Michael Faraday joined. Other developments that had self-contained recreation facilities elected not to. And it depended, I think, largely on what facilities were being provided with the development versus joining RA for the benefit of the larger suite of facilities and services that RA offers. So if you weren't providing those suite of services on site, then you use RA to supplement and provide them off site.
But they're not required to.
There's no covenant that says that you have to. And I know that I won't go back and debate it, but I know that there was a lot of conversation over the last 7, 8, 9 years about the county's ability to compel that as part of a zoning application.
I don't know how effective it will be to get everyone to join RA. If history is any example, it hasn't been, and then when some do, I think many people in RA don't know it's not always at the same rate that others are paying. What this is attempting to do, and I think we just also have to address the fact that you may have your own pools, you may have your own tennis court, but you're going to use the pads, and the pads are a shared asset that should be maintained by everyone in Reston. So I don't think it should be that controversial. I think that, you know, a lot of people in Reston, that's a big issue.
Walter, is there any way that not joining RA per se, but making a contribution to the upkeep of the pathways could be put into ordinance somehow, a follow-on motion or something? What is the mechanism?
Yeah, Tammy, it's a good question. And I've had some conversations with some folks in RA about exactly this. And there might be a way, a different type of public-private arrangement that RA and the county could do, but it would need to be an official program and not ad hoc.
Exactly. Thank
So,
you. That's what we would love to see.
Yeah.
Because it's being
Okay.
used in marketing. Oh, Reston, 55 miles of pathways. Yeah, and you're not joining RA, which I don't have a problem with. RA cannot necessarily provide a zillion pools and tennis courts for 100,000 people, but there should be some chip in for the pathway maintenance. Thank you.
I've got a question now that we're on that, Tammy. You started it, so I've got to piggyback on that. So I don't understand how any developer or builder that elects while the project is in process that they don't have to meet the standards, the Reston principles, and go through the Reston Design Review Board for their projects. But once the project is built and they're delivering something that may be subpar to what RA would mandate, and then they can get in, it's a little conflated for me, but
I think
I don't
that's
understand.
also something important, Lynn. I don't think most people know that too, that some that have joined are not paying the same rates and they're not under the same RA rules.
Yeah. So how can you get in post project when it might be subpar to what the RA standards and the Design Review Board?
If I may interject on that.
Sure, please, Tam.
We can help this problem of the subpar, and I have been on P&Z and watched it happen. You're 100% right. And organizations will even say, we're not joining because we don't want RADRB to govern us, but we'll consider it after we're built and, and we have our RUPs, our residential use permits. A way around that rock is to make this plan have tree canopy goals and stormwater and things that RA would pay attention to. And I do have to say, I think the county stormwater requirements are pretty darn good. But oh boy, the canopy needs a lot to be desired. And as we go forward, week by week by week, we are learning so much more about the importance of canopy to climate change and
community health.
You took the heat island effect with people in an area without a lot of trees. And we see this with new development where it's being built too close to lot lines. We're losing our, canopy. So if we're strong enough in the eco chapter and in this community health, perhaps we can get around that rock and get things that are better designed. And that's my prayer. So thank you.
Michelle, this is Mike. I don't think we need to subject the entire task force to going through my 6 or 7 comments one by one. I would maybe either have a separate call or you could just respond to them in writing in the comment itself that I submitted on previous. I think that would be a better use of everyone's time.
Thank you, Mike. Bill Penniman, I know you had your hand raised. I didn't know if you had a comment or a question.
I've got a few, and some will be, if Michelle wants them in writing, I can do that for specific edits, but a few comments. First, just as a background, I mean, I'm not a Virginia real estate lawyer. Mark, David Gill, they are, so they can express their own opinion, but my understanding has always been simply that Reston Association is a homeowners association. It's not, doesn't have regulatory authority over people who are outside the realm of its homeowners association. So that's just a fundamental problem, and people may be persuaded to come in. But as far as the DRB goes, if I were a builder, I would be wary of making my multi-million-dollar project depend on the opinions of a few volunteers. But leave that aside. I think that explains a lot of why they may approach it the way they have. So more generally, Michelle, in terms of your draft, what you've said about disparities, even in close proximity to each other for wealth and so forth, that's certainly correct. The one question I have about the use of this HPI index is, I looked at it, and I looked at the one for Fairfax County, which is all there is. They don't have a separate one that I could find for Reston. But it made the following statement: the advanced statistical computations used to produce the HPI yielded a stunning finding. Education and economic resources accounted for 60% of the variation in life expectancy we see across the region. Housing and transportation explained 26%, and healthcare only accounted for 6%, which I found surprising, because I thought the whole point of putting it in here was that it all was there to explain healthcare disparities. And apparently, according to that report, very little of it actually has to do with the healthcare, which may go to our badly flawed system of Medicare, Medicaid, health insurance, and so forth, and Obamacare, which may not do as well as if when Tamia makes me king, you will have a really terrific healthcare system. Until then, we have, a sloppy one. But most people at this stage, I believe, are covered, even if not highly desirably. So that things like putting in data, illustrations on charges from particular providers, I question whether that's very useful for a comp plan. A, it's a slice in time. B, it's the insurance company's problem more than the individuals, I think.
So you can drill down and you can see Reston. And that's how I looked at the different census tracts. Yeah. And in the census tracts, you can also drill down into the data. And that's where we can see that we have some census tracts that do not have the same level of insurance that others do. And so that's why this does matter. And so your insurance might be fantastic and may cover the cost of it.
I agree with you. There are great disparities in the way our healthcare system works, but it's not really a Reston comp plan issue.
Here's why I disagree.
It's a national issue, a state issue, a somebody issue.
Of course, but it isn't. I would argue it's an everybody issue, and it is an issue when we look at the fact that we have one provider when compared to another large provider, and even compared to a sister hospital, has a charge rate that is significantly higher for some key basic common procedures here. And so one thing would be, well, let's see if we can't get some additional competition. Let's see if we can't expand the opportunities so that those without access to a car to drive to the best care possible, or those without access to, high quality insurance, can still get a good value and high quality without being overcharged. And so I think that this is a matter of saying that, look, we have a need for more affordable care. One of the ways we can do that is by encouraging that our land be used to achieve that. So I don't think that this is that crazy. I do think that healthcare is an everybody issue, and the affordability and quality should be something that everyone's focused on.
As a policy matter, I agree. I just question whether it fits in here. And as Mark Looney pointed out, because of regulatory restrictions on construction of new hospitals and new hospitals acquiring, particularly fancy equipment like MRI machines and the like. Again, what we say in the comp plan doesn't mean somebody can come along and get the approvals needed to build.
Of course
Might
not.
it be
None of
nice?
it
But
does.
part of the
no-
problem is, well,
That's absolutely true. We have a certificate of public need process. Anything would have to go through that process. This is simply just saying, you know what, there is a community need. There is land right now in Reston Town Center North where this would make the most sense to put something like this. This is a vision, just as everything else is. Will we get everything? I don't know. Will we ever get performing arts center and music venue? I don't know. Does that mean we don't put it in the comp plan? I don't think so. We're going to maybe need additional bonds for a library. Does that mean we don't put it in the comp plan? I don't think so. So I just happen to disagree, though.
I also have a concern with the idea that we should be writing things here that dictates to entities like Kaiser or other specific things they ought to add to their operations. I don't know if we have studied that thoroughly enough that we really have a basis for such an opinion. And to the extent it isn't well, I'm not sure, again, I question it's a comp plan issue. And I understand a lot of things are desirable, but I'm dubious about some of that.
Nothing in here is dictated. It's all encouraged in more vision language. So at least with that, I don't see anything that's been dictated. Even with where on one across the board, everyone I've spoken with says the lack of psychiatric inpatient beds is a huge problem in Reston right now. From the providers to police
a huge
officers.
problem. It's a huge problem throughout the state. I mean,
It is.
that doesn't mean it's less of a problem here or more of a problem here, but I'm just saying that's a statewide problem.
That's right.
But when we did talk to the Fairfax County health planners, they did specifically tell us that that is an issue for Reston more than other places in the county, and that's why we picked it up.
Another item at the broad level is the grocery store prescription. I would note that two illustrative cases, Lake Anne and Tall Oaks, say that you can't command that there be high quality grocery stores in every development. That's not the way that market has worked. We can encourage it. It would be great, but I don't think one should try to get too prescriptive on that. Beyond that, I think I'll do most of the rest in the comments.
I would like to take issue with Mr. Penniman's comments regarding Tall Oaks. Tall Oaks, that grocery store that was put in after Giant, and I know the county helped many vendors try to get set up, but the grocery stores that were put in were filthy and they were subpar. These were not national brands. These were, and I am all about supporting the local vendor, but if you cannot keep a grocery store sanitized, cleaned, and make it a good shopping experience, people are not going to go there. We now have a food desert serving people that live at Island Walk Cooperative. And there is a threat that the pedestrian access that these people have to go to Whole Foods, which is the next walkable grocery store, is being threatened to be closed. So I take issue with the Tall Oaks. That was an orchestrated redevelopment.
Well, I mean, I guess so, having watched it, Giant Food pulled out, and they couldn't get another quality grocery store, higher quality grocery store to go in. And when they got in, failed. I tried going to it myself, but it ended up failing.
Well, but the developer wanted to redevelop, and they raised their lease rate so high that every vendor that was leasing that property at Tall Oaks could not afford to pay the lease rates. So I will always take issue with Tall Oak. Sorry, Bill.
It's fine, you can,
Yep.
but the reality is I've seen this. Obviously, Lake End suffered it. I think Tall Oak suffered it. I've seen it in other places too. The grocery market is a difficult market. And so commanding that there should be one every half mile in the TSA, I think is unrealistic. That's really all I was trying to get across. Might be nice, and I would love to see a Mom's nearby, closer, but I think that's unrealistic. Any event, I'll send you some additional comments, although some of them you've seen before and didn't agree with them. And so, I don't know where we'll end up. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We have, Michelle, we have 3 additional hands. We have Chris Daniel, Jan, and Mark Looney. Chris Daniel, did you, oh, I see you unmuted.
Sure. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
No, Michelle, so I'm going to provide more detailed comments in a separate submission because obviously, working with me in the equity one, I have a bit of a government-ease way of trying to tweak sentences. I definitely like a lot of what's in here, and I disagree that we shouldn't push back on healthcare providers and some of the big ones around here because they are just as much residents of our community as anyone else. And so if we're trying to set aspirations and goals, we can't solely rely on the feds to do that. I say that speaking as a Fed, you can't just rely on the Fed to solve the problem. So I think putting objectives and requirements that we think we can set for comp plan are significant. And with the RA topic, I think that's even more key here. There's clearly a disconnect there that perhaps the supervisors and others can help us solve between contributing to what makes Reston. But one way we can do it as members of this task force is put in ideas that we would like to see in the comp plan that support things like community health, that go beyond just the actual doctors and physicians, but to the spaces we have. And I think this marries into a lot of the other initiatives in the other areas that others like Tammy have pointed out. So I'm happy to see this. And again, I think the idea is that this is a raw section. This is meant to be new. So we're going to have staff input on it, but I think we should not be holding back and putting some expectations in there, because when new development comes, whether it's from, commercial development or healthcare development, I don't want to assume that, because it's one of the big providers, they know what's best for me. That's not an assumption I want to live off of anymore. So I'm going to send comments in, but I want to thank you for all the effort you put into this, because I think it's going in the right direction. And I also appreciate that you've acknowledged that a lot of it is encouraged again. So it's not like we're mandating requirements in many of these places, but if we don't highlight these concerns, then when development comes in for submissions and for review by the county, I think this is great for folks to highlight how they're helping meet requirements in the comp plan, because wouldn't that make their proposal more appetizing, I would hope. So that's all my 10 cents. Thanks again, Michelle.
Thank you, Chris. Jan, I see you're unmuted.
Oh, okay. No, I'm muted. I mean, yeah, I'm unmuted.
Yeah, you're unmuted. Yeah.
I get so confused. Oh, all right. I really, Michelle, this is fantastic. I feel very important that we put in anything that is important in here. Not assume that, well, that's never going to happen. I think if it's in here, then the possibility of anything happening is going to be increased a lot. So I think that's good. I totally agree with Chris about that. I think that it's important to push the psychiatric beds. I think this is really well done, and we should keep everything in as it is, not take things out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. Mark Looney, I think you had your hand up.
So my comments, questions are more sort of at a macro level, which is regardless of the sections in this particular draft, there's a lot of use of the terms should and must and will from everything from, grocery stores within a half mile of everybody to incorporation of indoor air quality testing and monitoring to you name it. And I guess my question is this aspirational in your mind, or is this something that development applications are going to have to proffer to that they will conduct indoor air quality monitoring every 90 days? Or whatever the standard is. I guess my question is, I know that there's a desire to have must and should and will as the verbs, but are we expecting it to happen on all of these topics, some of these topics? Sort of what's the scope of what you think this is intended to produce at the end of the day?
I think it's a combination. I think that at the bare minimum, we should expecting healthy buildings and should not be a crazy thing to say that would be a must. There are many buildings that are using that as a marketing tool now. And people want to know about the ventilation in the buildings where they're going to be working. So I don't think that that's imposing something that's just outrageous. There are others though that are more aspirational or that wouldn't also necessarily apply everywhere. Hopefully some of that will be achieved in other ways, but I do think some things on, saying, yeah, we want healthier buildings here in Reston. That's a must.
I guess my response is all of that is clearly desirable. I think the question becomes who's the enforcer of that scenario and how do they go about doing it? Just as an example, the county has green building standards that developments must comply with or achieve as part of their project, and they will proffer to become LEED silver, LEED platinum, earthcraft, whatever the standard is. But the county relies on the third-party certifications to quality control check whether those commitments have been honored. So you're committing to go to the USGBC, as an example, and secure the documentation that says you've met that standard, whatever it is that you've proffered to. I guess my question is, are we now in the position of asking county staff to evaluate and monitor the cleaning and replacement of air filters within a building as part of their ongoing efforts? Because unless there's an enforcement mechanism in place, I don't know how you implement this, and I don't know who's enforcing it.
So I don't completely agree with you, but I think that there are also means to ensure buildings are healthy. There are different certifications, including in LEED, I think it's LEED Neighborhood, has a section on healthy buildings. So while there's also Boston Properties has been using Fitwell as a certification. So there are certifications. I wasn't as specific in this document. Initially, I had said something like Fitwell, but left that more up to the applicant.
Right. I guess what I'm trying to understand is what's the objective to be met, right? Because whether it's the staff or whether it's the applicant, part of what you're doing is going down the checklist of expectations. And I'm just worried that there's a lot of expectations here that don't lend themselves to checklists, and how the applicant or the staff evaluate whether it's been met or not through the process. That's really what I'm driving at. I can it's a separate conversation as to whether that ought to be a measurement for whether a project is approvable from a development standpoint. But if you're going to apply a standard, I think you would want to have something that gives you an indication as to when the standard has been met, as opposed to just an amorphous, you're gonna do a healthy building, unless you're going to get into, proffering that you're going to change the air filters every 3 months as a proffer, which I don't think you want to do because there's nobody to enforce it.
I think that I'd be happy to talk about it with you more, but I don't think that. I think there are a number of things in the comp plan that probably could be said the same of. So if
Sure,
you,
I don't disagree with that, right? But I think, the Planning Commission takes years to figure out what the green building standard is going to be. They take years to figure out what the stormwater standards are going to be, because there's a process for how to go about creating that policy. And I'm just suggesting that to help the developers figure out what you want, giving them some direction of what the expectations are is helpful. That's all. I'm not quibbling with the objective necessarily. It's the sort of how do you implement it question.
And Mark, you might want to bring some of this back up when we have the environment chapter, because we are trying to align ourselves, between chapters, and we have had some staff feedback that Walter was able to send us. What you have brought up is not one of the things that they brought up to us. But if you could either defer some of this to the environmental chapter, unless Tammy or Bill
Sure,
wanna help here, but or if you what do you think what should it be then? If it shouldn't be that, then what should it be?
I guess and I don't know the particulars of how the standards are or what the certification programs are. I'm just going through, and each one of these bullets on however many pages there are in this section carry with it some expectation that once you get down into the active, what's the title of the section, the active community section or whatever it is, the vision for improved active living facilities in Reston. Once you get to that point, and everything from that point down to the end, each of these bullet points carries an expectation that developments will achieve. And I'm just envisioning having a proffer list that's 187 pages long about how you're meeting each one of these expectations, versus selecting a program or a process that is universal in its application, or at least more known, like LEED or Earthcraft or something else in the context of green buildings, and suggesting that you have an expectation of meeting those things. And I think the other piece of it, and this is a separate conversation, is a lot of these bullets are targeted at off-site elements that an individual property owner doesn't control, right? So for example, missing links in pedestrian connections, the county's collecting money, taxes, proffers from property owners in the TSAs to finance public construction of those missing links, because property owner A can't go onto the property of property owner B and just simply construct a sidewalk on their property because there's a missing link. There's, legal and other barriers to doing that. And so the county is theoretically acting as the provider of last resort, for lack of a better term, for those missing link facilities, because they have condemnation authority. They have other legal means to achieve the objectives of connecting to separated facilities. But a lot of the conversation and the bullets themselves are sort of directed as each development project must ensure that those missing links are furnished. And I think that's an expectation that goes beyond what's achievable. And that there's already a facility or a process and a program in place to implement that, utilizing the authorities that the government has that private sector owners don't have. And so it's a nuance that is critical, but I don't know that we've captured it here.
Can you give some suggestion? Like I understand that you are explaining what you think this can't do, but where's this, like we need text or we need solutions to it, because one of the core tenets, and I think it was Tammy that spoke to this earlier, is it is an expectation in Reston because we're a planned community. So we're trying to implement development that brings to us those items. So, but we need, if this isn't the right solution, then we need a different solution.
I guess what I would say is, you know, these expectations just pile one on top of the other on top of the other. And we're going to have 175 pages worth of expectations, all of which are important to Reston, all of which are critical, all of which are things that people want to see done. I'm suggesting that we have to temper that with what's achievable. And so what I would propose is to strip a lot of this out, as opposed to coming in and saying, you know, achieve this particular indoor air quality standard, because A, I don't know what that is. I'm not as versed in it. And B, at some level, you're dependent on the market. I mean, you mentioned earlier about particular property owners marketing their projects based on certain differentiators as to the rest of the market. That's the sort of thing you want to encourage, but I don't know that you can compel it. And I think the issue is with this document, we're trying to compel it across the board on 100% of every project. And so it's a philosophical difference as much as a detailed nuance difference of whether it's this particular air quality program or that particular air quality program. I just don't know that you can put the county in the position of having 187 checklist items that every development has to satisfy, in addition to all the other things. I mean, we haven't gotten to the earned density credit conversation yet. And I don't know how these elements factor into that.
And Mark, I don't have an answer for you except my previous answer, which is it's something that we want, and I'm, you know, happy to talk about it. But unless we are hearing from others on the task force that it's not something that's wanted, this is the best that Michelle and I, in talking with everyone that we could talk to put it together, came up.
And I would like to break in and say, let's not hyperbolize this as 187 items. That's bullshit. This is not 187 items, but we have to have some aspirations. As long as the language is not must or will, it's not insisting, but it's setting an aspiration. And perhaps we can, you know, companies that do comply with the upper standards can market as blue ribbon complying with the entire Reston comp plan. I mean, there's some ways perhaps to nuance cooperation with achieving some of these aspirational items as advantageous to those who are willing to spend the extra money to do it. And it comes down to dollars of profit when all is said and done. So, you know, let's just agree that it is aspirational, and maybe we can work
Timmy,
on tweaking the
yeah, I
language.
mean, my 187 was not necessarily to this chapter, because this chapter has 41 musts in it. The 187 was coming sort of across the board of all of the 16 chapters or whatever it ends up being, right? And if each one of these is a must, that's 41 checklist items for the health section, and that doesn't address the equity, and it doesn't address the parks, and it doesn't address the open space, and it doesn't address all the other things. I'm just suggesting that at some point you're going to end up where the expectations override what's achievable, and
So,
you're going to.
so, but Mark, I'm sorry, but you know, we we have things that as a community we do expect and want, and so that list might be longer than you think is, you know, convenient. But we're talking about, you know, building a healthy community where we know that, you know, when our loved ones go to work in a building, they're going to have healthy air. I don't think that that's crazy. And I'm sorry that it might be a longer checklist, but that just seems like a convenience issue more so than a actual substantive issue.
No, I mean, I guess what I'm suggesting is that that's a long list for the county to enforce, when it's a land use conversation as opposed to a general health and welfare conversation, right? I mean, there's all sorts of regulations, federal and otherwise, that deal with indoor air quality. I don't know why we're substituting our judgment for those regulations, but that's seemingly what we're doing. And I'm just suggesting that they're focusing on the things that affect land use as opposed to things that are the jurisdiction of other agencies, other government entities, whatever it is, or at least setting some clear expectations for the things that matter the most is achievable. I just it's a question of sort of you can't be all things to all people, I guess, is the better way to put it.
I agree, but we also want development to design buildings that would meet these standards. That, I mean, we're talking about the built environment. We're not going post-built environment. We're saying these things should be included in how you're designing the building. And I'm not sure that some of them are actually going beyond what Fairfax already has.
And I agree in certain
the
instances.
books.
Yeah, in certain instances, the complete streets, all that stuff, that's all part and parcel of the expectations. And I don't have any problems with that. I can, quibble as to whether it ought to be duplicated here, but I don't have a problem with that because you're doing it anyway. And clearly there are things that should be important to the community that go above and beyond what other areas of the county might want to see or insist upon, because they don't have the benefits that Reston has in terms of transit facilities and other things. I just get nervous when this particular chapter has 41 musts and we haven't even gotten to the other 15. So that's all my point is. Or that's part of my point.
Well, we
You,
can,
Mark.
And maybe that's the reconciliation process at the end.
we can look at what the musts are and decide, but there are several things that are so important. I think we should keep them as musts. And this is community health. I don't think that we should be talking blanketly about all the chapters when we're discussing community health right now. I think that we can go over it and say, well, you know, this is that important that this should be a must. But this could be a suggestion and go that way. But I think that we need to state what we expect developers to do, and they're not going to do it unless it's strongly worded. They're not going to think about it anyway. And if we suggest, well, you could do this if you like, they're not going to like. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you, Mark. I think that was some good discussion. I actually hadn't been checking the hands, and I see that we have a couple hands still up. So I saw Jan put hers down. We do have Maura Callahan, Lynn, David Gill, Richard Fornicola, and then if there are any additional hands, please put them up, and maybe I can circle back with Commissioner Carter if he had any additional comments. But Maura Callahan, did you want to do you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I have quite a few comments, but I do have some specific areas of this plan that I wanted to point out. But I do want to go really quickly and just say I really enjoyed listening to the conversation between you guys. I thought it was interesting because I can kind of see both sides of the coin here. And, in Reston, we want people to come, we do want development. It's not that we don't. We want certain kind of development. But on the other hand, if we're too stringent, I could see where it would turn a developer off, because you can obviously imagine they have to go through a lot of hoops. It costs a lot of money. And we just have to be careful. There's a fine balance. I absolutely believe we can't, I'm not saying we shouldn't ask for what we want and it shouldn't be aspirational, but we also have to be very careful as well. And I wonder if there's already building codes that some of this is in, then I would recommend removing anything that's already being addressed in a building code and leave in some of the aspirational things that are not yet mentioned in a building code, because it doesn't seem, I agree with Mark, it doesn't seem, why would you double do language? It doesn't seem, otherwise it's so wordy. You could have every building code in here. It doesn't make any sense to me. But let me jump to the areas which I wanted to ask questions about really quickly. If you jump up to section 2, where you show the map, Michelle, there's language there that I didn't see. Your paragraph on the top of page 2 where it talks about Wheelie TSA and this census tract 4823. If you're going to have that map there, it'd be great to know exactly where that is, because I see a lot of different green colors, but I'm not sure exactly where these tracks are that they're talking about. So that
that map was also just pulled from Healthy Place, the Healthy Place Index website. I would hope that any map that makes it in would be professionally done and not pulled with a screen grab.
Yeah. Okay, that would be helpful, because I'm looking there thinking, which section is that? Okay, and then on page 3, I had a question about page 3. See the second paragraph? It says private providers include 213 physicians, 1 full service, 230 bed acute medical. Now, when you say private providers, but then you mention urgent care facilities. So if it's a private provider, it was always my understanding that urgent care takes anybody, regardless of who they are. So I'm confused by the word private providers in that sentence. And I feel like I need some clarity on what we're trying to say there.
Private providers refers to their employer, not who they take. So they're employed by Inova Urgent Care.
Okay. I don't know. I'm just wondering if that's the right way to phrase that. I don't know. Wouldn't it be better to just tell how many beds we have for people in Reston? Unless that's not the point you're trying to make.
No, the number of providers would be different than beds.
Okay, maybe I just don't understand what that paragraph's trying to achieve. I'll read through that later and give that some more thought. I was assuming that we're talking about people in Reston and how much healthcare we have. Do we have anywhere in here where we talk about how many beds we have for the community? Or is it just about equity?
So
does that make sense? I don't know if you understand the question. But I guess what I'm thinking of is,
no.
Okay, for example, right now we have COVID. And if we have a hospital with a certain number of beds, they're going to take people whether they have insurance or they don't, because they have to do that. So I guess my question is, how many beds do we have for the community as a whole, regardless of what insurance they have?
That would be 231. The private refers to the fact that HCA is privately owned and not publicly owned.
Okay. So those 230 beds are for everybody, regardless whether they're privately insured or have no insurance. Is that right?
They are required, I believe, to take Medicaid patients in emergency situations. I don't know that they are required to take Medicaid patients in more outpatient situations. But
Okay.
I can't speak to that exactly, but I know, or it's my understanding rather, that the level of services that they provide to Medicaid patients is on the lower side. So they're treating fewer.
Okay. All right. All right. I hope somewhere in the plan we talk about just how many beds we have for the community as a whole. I mean, I understand the whole inequity issue, but as a comp plan, I hope we also address just how many beds we have for the community, especially if it's going to grow. I don't know if that's in here or somewhere else.
Sorry, no, that is the 231 is for everybody. We have one hospital with 231 beds for everybody.
Okay. Maybe it's just the way it's written. It's not written clear enough for me to understand that. But okay, that's just me. Maybe I'm a little thick. All right, page 10. I wanted to go to page. Hold on a second. Page 10. Someone brought this up and I thought it was really interesting. Mixed-use development applications close to metros must include access to public restrooms. What do you mean by that? I don't understand. If I'm a developer and I'm doing a mixed-use development, I have to provide public restrooms?
Publicly available restrooms are needed in a community. So
is every mixed-use developer supposed to provide that? I don't know that that's realistic. I don't know. I'm not a developer, but I wonder about that statement.
There is a need for publicly available restrooms, and they can't only be at the metro station. So, this is a public health issue, is making sure that we have access to restrooms. And I think if you have retail and shopping, you should have some publicly available restrooms.
No, I don't disagree with the need for public restrooms. I'm just not sure whose responsibility that is, or I don't know. It's an interesting, I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that. And then go down to see where it says exercise, just a little bit below that. It says development applications must incorporate opportunities for exercise on site. When you say development applications, what do you mean by that? Do you mean residential development applications? I wasn't sure. I mean, development applications could be anything. It could be an office building, could be a store. I mean, what do you mean by development applications?
This would be for this one. It would be. I guess I should have their mixed use and but it is residential.
Okay, it just didn't
I don't
say
know
that. I
office
wonder if we should be
space.
more
That's
clear.
fine. Do you want to send some of this in writing? That might be real helpful.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Okay, that was my last comment. It was in that section specifically, there's a lot of talk about development must do this. I just wonder if we should be more specific about what type of development, because there's all kinds of development. All right, thank you.
That would be helpful to wordsmith, because when you're writing a document and then editing it, at some point it's easy to miss things like that.
No, thanks.
Thank you, Moira. And I know that Lynn just sent through the chat that she lowered her hand. So David Gill and then Richard Fernicola, and then we'll circle with Commissioner Carter, see if he had any comments. David Gill, did you want to go?
Yeah, I'll just keep my comments real brief because I think we've touched on all of this. But just building on what Mark said, I will caution that a lot of these are operational musts post-development, and the county is had a very hard time dealing with proffers and or development conditions that are sort of post-operation like that. So we mentioned the publicly available restrooms. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean we have to put out a sign? Does that mean we can't close it down for renovation? Does that mean that a retailer can't require a customer to do it? Does it have to be owned by the county? There's a lot of those concerns. And then as that ownership changes over time, make it very difficult to really drill down on. And I don't deny that everybody needs to go to be able to use the restroom, but it seems to me that mandating it in the comprehensive plan that gets reflected in development meters and the proffers may not be the best way to do that. Similarly with the exercise one or the street maintenance ones, how often do you scrape the snow and to what level and how much salt do you put down? Should the county really be tasked with trying to enforce whether or not that's been done properly or to what extent? And to have an extensive proffer revisiting that doesn't seem to be something that should be part of the comprehensive plan document. On the exercises, taste change, if a, I don't know, hair salon application goes in, do they have to do the exercise? If it's a homeowner that comes in for an SE for a daycare in their yard, do they have to demonstrate how this is satisfied? There's a lot of things that apply in these applications in terms of how it's implemented that puts the county in a really difficult position to enforce later on. And I just want to make sure we think about how to maybe achieve some of these goals up front that don't have, lasting operational concerns later.
Thank you, David. Sorry,
David,
I
if
was
you
muted.
could send those thoughts, within the text of how
Sure.
you think it should be defined, or if you think that
Yep.
we, like Mara just said, and I can't tell you why in one bullet we said mixed use and the other one we didn't. We were probably focusing more on the point of the bullet than and miss some of that. So that would be helpful to define.
Understood.
It would be helpful too if folks could really come up with some solutions. It is.
I mean, I guess,
Yeah.
like with, do we have an issue with the snow and ice? Is that something we need to solve for here? Because a lot of the streets are also VDOT maintained if they're public, or it's an HOA. Individual developers really don't have a lot of control of it after it's turned over, absent the larger ones like a Comstock or a Boston Properties. But I'll get my comments in writing on my thoughts there.
Thank you, David. And Richard Fernicola, you get the last word before we'll check in with Commissioner Carter.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jose. Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon some of the things that Mark had brought up earlier. And being the only developer on the task force, just wanted to give you kind of my thoughts and how ultimately, we would look at a development, based on the future comp plan being implemented. We would have to, early on try to, quantify each of the musts that we're required to provide. So to Mark's point, having standards that can be easily identified would be helpful for the development community for whatever case we're talking about or whatever must we're talking about. Otherwise, we would have to assume, worst case scenario. And, again, Brookfield prides itself on creating, placemaking globally, providing, green design, affordable housing, Arts Brookfield. But at some point, just being open and honest, we would potentially reach a breaking point if there's too many requirements, too many musts, and we couldn't provide or quantify or provide each of those specific requirements. And it's beyond, just throwing more money at a project. It gets to the point where the project is not feasible. And then at that point, it potentially becomes counterproductive and we can't afford affordable housing or open space or contribute to the road fund or the school fund or, create parks. So, and again, we're only partway, we're almost to the end, but partway through the process. And it's even hard for me to really quantify all of the different musts throughout the document to figure out, if we were developing a project in the future, whether we would hit that breaking point. So I just want, to give my perspective, and I'll give specific, more detailed comments to this section of the document under a separate email. So thank you, Jose. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Richard. Commissioner.
May I just say, one thing on that point? I mean, I recognize that any requirement seems as a burden or some form of red tape, but I hope that you can work with us to make this, or to understand better too, what we're trying to do here is, again, prioritize the health of the occupants in the building and the community members. and to get to that point. And so some, some solutions would be fantastic and greatly appreciated. And, I recognize that, we'd like to make this as easy as possible, but I also don't think that, asking for a healthy building should be a crazy ask. So, again, if folks can help us make this better, but also, just recognize that we do have some community goals that we're hoping to achieve. That would be fantastic. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Understood. And you mentioned LEED neighborhood requirements. LEED, the way the LEED works is you have to get an X number of points, but you have kind of a menu to choose from. So it's not you need to hit every category and provide every category. You need to get a certain amount of points, and that equates to a green design or a healthy building. I don't know if that's too complicated for the but again.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. You're already doing a lot of must.
Yeah.
You're right, though, that you get to pick and choose when you're talking LEED. So I recognize that. So again, I'm just wondering, though, if maybe you can, help us get there, because I think this has been one of the things that would just be greatly appreciated, especially from the developers and representatives on the call. Let's make this something that everyone can be proud of, and that we will have, a higher standard of healthy buildings in Reston. I think that benefits the whole community.
Agreed. And Mark and I will regroup, and we'll get you collective comments to the section.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle and Richard. Commissioner Carter, did you have any comments?
I'm not sure how helpful I'm going to be, but maybe a couple things would be useful. This is a new thing. Planning departments across the country are struggling with how to write this. And maybe I can turn up some. I'm not sure very many of them are going to be as thorough as this is, but let me look at some other examples. I do think maybe some help from the Land Development Services, perhaps particularly on this code overlap issue. There may be some codes that overlap. I do think how this is written exactly will be important. Is it going to be will and must, or it should be should it be shall, should it be desirable? Probably a look at all of those things. And then there are probably some conflicts, and we don't have all the other chapters together yet, but there are probably some overlaps with transportation and environment, particularly, and maybe a lot in earned density. We ought to look at that. What I learned is these things start from, and sorry for being a little bit of a lawyer here, the planning starts with nuisance law. So what is wrong with an area that needs to be fixed? And so just doing things better in Reston may not be good enough. We've got to talk about what is wrong with Reston, what is done right in Reston, and then what is wrong and how do we fix it. That kind of train of thought might be helpful, and it might be help us to focus a little bit more. But that's how this may be, and that's true of other chapters too. I think. What is special about specifically about Reston? Maybe we're short hospital beds. Maybe we are. So we ought to do something about that. Maybe we're short in other areas, decentralized emergency rooms or doc in the box kind of things. We ought to encourage some of those in our village centers, perhaps. So talk about what's right, and then what is specifically wrong with Reston, and how can we fix it? It can't be just because Restonites feel like we ought to be smarter and more clever than the rest of the county. It has to be something that has to do with Reston. I think might help us to focus a bit. So I'm not sure how helpful all those comments have been, but I just say that a lot of jurisdictions are struggling with exactly how to write these chapters. So maybe that's enough for me.
Yeah, and we've talked with Jose and Walter about follow-on motions, because I think you're right, John. Some of this data is very difficult to come by, specifically for Reston.
Yeah.
So, and we've tried to get as many of this county staff and private entities to help us achieve that. So it would be easy to show, here's the data that supports the ask. But I think some of this is the health chapter is going to be an imperfect chapter going into this comp plan because it is new. And a
Yes.
lot of the things that we can get from the health chapter is in 5 years. Well, we know exactly now what data we want in order
Yeah.
to help inform these decisions. And I think that Walter's been very supportive of potentially helping us get that data. But that is a struggle in the health chapter.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some push and pull about this chapter throughout the country. We might see what's happened.
And John, on access, that was the attempt at the setup. Here's
Mhm.
what we have.
Right.
Here's
Yeah.
what's
I
needed.
see that in some
Here's
cases.
a vision of where it could go. Yeah. Yeah.
But we tend to, and it's not just this chapter, we tend to have very high aspirations here in Reston. And when this gets to the Board of Supervisors, not that they don't want high aspirations, but they tend to want to think of the county as a whole. And why does one jurisdiction get treated better than some other jurisdiction? There is going to be a reckoning as far as that's concerned. So we ought to be careful and make sure these things all have to do with Reston. Not just because we feel like we're smarter and better than the rest, everybody else in the county. And it's because we really need this in Reston. So anyway, I'll look around and see what I can find.
Thank you, because I'm pretty sure Michelle and I have tried to read every health chapter across the U.S.
Yeah.
Literally for 2 years. That's what we've been doing.
I might have some other resources maybe. So
That would be,
try
we'll
that.
take all the resources
Yeah.
all of you guys can provide.
Well, I also think that there is a perception, well, it's actual reality that this has been ignored as we see all of the development that has been taking place along the TSA. So it's important for us to make sure that this is acknowledged as a requirement and not overlooked, not continually overlooked. So I think, Michelle, you've done a great job on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then is
Thank
that
you,
is that
Michelle and
everyone?
Jennifer.
Okay, then again, just, if you can send edits and, specifically just one last time on my little soapbox solutions. I think that is really what we would love. And, we'd love this to be a collaborative effort. So please do send those in, especially the developers and developers representatives. The solutions would be great. Thank you.
I would also ask, we do need to get to the point where we start approving chapters, and I know we've only done a few. So I would say that we really need them by, the next couple of weeks, because I'm imagining we're not going to get this approved next Tuesday, but I would hope by one of the early meetings in January, this would come up as an approved chapter so we can keep moving forward. So I think at this point, it's fully written, and, next time we bring up health, we need to think about approving the version that we bring.
Thank you, Jennifer and Michelle. Yeah, so folks in the task force can send comments directly to you guys. That would be the best way.
Yep, that would be fine.
Okay.
Anyway, you guys can, I think both Michelle and I's email addresses have been out there. So if you don't have
Okay.
it, I'm sure Jose can get it to you along with our cell phone numbers.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Jennifer. So any other comments, questions on community health before we move on to the next item on our agenda? Okay, so hearing none, Jennifer, do you want me to give you the presenter to go over the next item on Parks and Open Space?
Sure.
Okay, give me one moment.
And while Jose's doing that, and I can bring it up. This chapter has been before the task force several times now, so I actually was hoping we could move this one forward tonight. And what I have done and have gotten some help from some fellow task members to kind of help read through and make sure we're catching everything is really take the subgroup items from the summer and reconcile those within the document, and otherwise took people's comments and tried to incorporate them. So I feel like we've gone through editing of this one several times, and what I'm looking for here, unless you guys have something specific, is not to go through the chapter and talk about what has changed, because I sent you the red lines, but to have you guys let me know what you have questions on so that we can resolve any of the major issues. I'm sure that there will be some tweaks to the language, but as I put in my email, it's anything major I'd like to get resolved tonight, and then have everyone send me tweaks to language that doesn't change the meaning of the language, but makes the language better, by the end of the week, so we can wrap this one up before the holidays. And the one thing that is left unresolved in this document is the TSA areas, and there's been a debate for months about how many fields the TSA requires. I know there's a calculation that the staff can do and tell us. So 12 is left in the document, but it's denoted at the top that staff will get us that final number when the land use chapter is finished being calculated. Otherwise, I just am happy to take questions or comments about things you want to talk about.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I'm looking at the panelists, and I don't know if they were previous hands for the community health discussion, but I see Mark Looney and Richard Fernicola. I didn't know if they had.
That's a mistake, Jose.
Oh, no worries. It's all good. But I do see John Mooney has a hand, and he is unmuted, Jennifer. John?
Thank you, Jose. I'll be very brief. I sent Jennifer rather late, quite late, a few comments, but my major comment is I think this is an extraordinary piece of work. I have no major issues, so I'm not going to comment except to invite Jennifer to look at the few small comments I made earlier in writing. Thank you. Good job.
Sure. Happy to incorporate those.
So Bill Penniman, I see you have a hand up. Bill, did you want to unmute?
Yes. So on the issue of the number of fields in TSAs or nearby and the implications, that's something I do feel strongly about, because I've had the feeling both on this task force and also before that to some extent that's an issue being used as a cudgel to keep down development in the TSAs, because it's obvious that if you don't take over golf courses, which is not the plan, then that it's not possible to build 12 new fields within 5 or 10 minute walk of the TSAs. And I also think it ignores the fact that if you look through that list of athletic fields, I mean, Reston has huge 39 athletic fields existing or immediately planned, and counting next door over 40. That so many that golf, I mean, anybody who moves to the TSAs is deluged with opportunities for athletic out and reducing development because they can't play enough football, to me, makes no policy, environmental, or economic sense. So I'm glad that's going to go to the staff, but I will write something that summarizes my points on this issue, because it would be, I want to be sure that the staff has the full picture. A couple other things, and I'll keep it just to some of the big points. There's a lot of repetition, so that, for example, the 12 athletic field issue shows up 3 times at least. And the very repetition of it tends to suggest that the should means something more like must. The repetition also occurs for some other things. On the issue of the golf courses, 2 comments. I see somebody's inserted a comment on how that 2018 document had declared these to be landmarks of Reston. And I went back and I looked, and I did see some stars for landmarks, but just to put it in context, other landmarks include the North County Government Center, the Reston Association Central Services Facility, the hospital, one of the hospitals. I mean, Herndon, Monroe Park and Ride, these are not landmarks in the usual sense. And then there are other examples. It also notes that walls can be considered as landmarks. So I would suggest taking that out. And instead of saying that the golf courses will be continued, since I thought that was not an issue we were going to try and resolve here, if you want to say expected, that's fine. I don't, because that certainly is expected. But and then I may send you some other specific comments, but at the broad level, those are the comments I would give. Thanks.
So I would, you know, is
I think the
there
language for the golf courses is fine the way it is. Thank you.
any other comments to what Bill said? Because he's brought up a few issues and we need to resolve whether we're willing to make those changes in the document.
Yeah, just a question I have. My understanding is that the 12 athletic field is based on a formula that the county has in terms of population versus services that are provided. And so in that case, I mean, in addition, roads, sidewalks, open space, there's all sorts of things that the county provides for in response to increases in population. And playing fields are certainly part of that. And you can't separate it unless you take out everything.
My point is that in the case of Reston, given the context and the very many other options in existence and planned, whether somebody can play football should not be a determinant as to whether there will be enough housing near the subways.
Well, clearly, Billy, you don't have any conversations with our soccer community or our baseball community or any other athletic community that we have around here. And the athletic community is every bit as important as any other community in this area. And as far as Reston having facilities, we've been over this 100 times. Those are Reston Association fields. They are not county fields. There's a difference. And we need to keep that in mind when we're looking at what we need to service the population. All of us want the TSA to work. And for the TSA to work, there needs to be the services that the county has determined are required for the amount of people that are going to be living in there. So it's very clear cut.
I'd like to add, they also need to be in walking distance. The goal, or one of the goals of the TSA, again, is to limit car trips and to limit this use of our cars. So, you know, we can't say this is what we're trying to do in the TSA. Oh, but you have to go take a car to go to the nearest field. It doesn't, you can't have it both ways.
if you don't build housing near the
And-
subways, it will increase traffic overall.
I just, to me, we've just been over this, lots of times. I forgot, when we first brought this to the group, but we've been over some of these comments kind of in the same fashion. Back to Jennifer's comment, earlier, trying to move along here. I mean, we'd like to have this be a perfect document, but it's kind of looks pretty good. I don't know that Bill were, causing major problems here with some of these issues.
I move that we should just accept it as it's written. I think we've been over it enough times. I think it's what we want to say. I think that Jennifer's done an amazing job with it and that we should just take a vote.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Let's get it going.
Thank you,
This is
Tammy.
Moyer.
I would have
Can I make a-
seconded it
What
if
do we
you had
do?
not.
Can I
Ready
make
to
a really
go.
quick- This is Moyer. Can I make a quick, or have a quick question? Jennifer, were you here last week at all?
I was not, but I listened to the video afterwards. I was sick.
There was some discussion in that meeting, and I can't even remember what part of the plan we were looking at. But somebody threw in Stratton Woods into some other part of the plan, and I do agree it's a Fairfax County park, but I also did not agree or don't think that it's a Reston park. And so
It's
it's
not.
in some other part of the plan.
not.
So John Carter or Walter or Jose, can you make sure that we look at that part again and maybe take that out, because it is listed somewhere else and it's not listed in this section. So it would be a mistake if we had it in one and not the other. That's all.
It's
So
not.
we
in the
did
rest
talk,
of the boundary.
yeah, and we did talk about it at the subgroup meetings in this chapter in particular. And the subgroup had voted that we would not list facilities that are not within Reston, comp plan boundaries. But
Right.
the only way we would reference them is if we were trying to do something to get to them. Like for instance, there's some language here that says, we'd like to be able to get to Lake Fairfax Park. So it's referenced, but it's
I
not
saw
listed
that.
as a facility.
All right, let's make sure we catch that Stratton Woods. I don't remember I can't even remember. It was only a week ago and I can't even remember where it was, but let's make sure we get that out.
It was the inventory in the public facilities. We listed all the parks.
Make sure that doesn't get in there.
Okay, and Jan, I'm guessing, and Tammy's second was for approval of the parks chapter overall, right?
Right.
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 Okay.
I just wanted to make sure there weren't any, last minute comments before we voted. And I think Maura just had that one.
Okay.
I don't see any other hands up.
John,
Jennifer, can I-
Commissioner Carter, do you want to say something?
Unless somebody wants to go ahead of me.
We don't have anyone else on the
I
list.
don't think there's anyone else here.
I do.
I was
think
gonna-
we do need those calculations, and no, you can't do the calculations until we have the land use done. So that's kind of going to be hanging out there a bit for a while. Minor, I would add the lakes to the Stream Valley Park discussion. Even if you just said lakes in there, I think that it's such a major part of Reston. We probably ought to add that.
Sure.
The other thing is, I really appreciate the brevity in this chapter. It's a focus on recommendations, which is just more to my personal liking. But I think this will be a very photogenic chapter. I think once we get the graphics, and the brevity is very good. I would suggest maybe a little bit less on the playgrounds in that one section, and maybe there are other places for playgrounds, such as the big linear park that runs the length of Reston. You might want to mention in there. But other than that, I think it should move on. I assume there will be some minor editing, even
Right.
if this gets passed.
Right. And playgrounds has a little bit more detail than it did. I think some of that detail, is, if you guys have comments on it, happy to make edits, but because it hadn't been brought up before, we were trying to
Yeah.
give you a visual of in words, but we can, cut or look at some of the text and then use pictures
Yeah.
instead.
With maybe a caption to
Right.
be able to cut down on the words and be
Exactly.
captioned with the photos. Yeah.
Exactly.
Very
Jennifer,
good.
Jennifer, before I start counting virtual hands, I think Mark Looney had a
Okay.
quick comment or
Yeah,
question.
I had a quick question on, so I don't know that I'd focused on this before, but on the Sunrise Valley linear park concept,
Mhm.
what's the length or section of Sunrise Valley Drive to which that would apply? I see, for example, in the Reston Parkway linear park and even in the WNOD Trail Park, I guess, or at least I have a better sense of where that would be. Sunrise Valley Drive runs from Hunter Mill all the way down to, I guess, theoretically, Centerville Road. And so are we intending it to go that far? Is there a particular section of it? And I'll just flag for conversation that some of that conflicts with some of the urban design standards that are already adopted. And so I wonder how we're going to reconcile that piece of it.
I believe that we'll take it on as much. We're not going to get it all along Sunrise Valley because some of this has just been redeveloped and it didn't give it. But this is a kind of another prime example of something that we got that we don't like, and we want to make sure that we preserve and protect that the description that is in parks as far as we can go down Sunrise Valley Drive. And I know that for Campus Commons, it was recognized that it was an issue, and that's why we worked with the developer, and Carter helped us put numbers to things to really make a true picture of what that would look like. And so, we'd like to see it, yes, throughout Sunrise Valley Drive within the Reston boundaries is the intention. Anywhere that we can get it that it hasn't already been developed.
So the thought is that it would extend east of Campus Commons then, even though that area is not planned for redevelopment at the moment, and then I guess westbound all the way to, I guess, Hernan Monroe and beyond on the other end.
Correct. And it's not planned for redevelopment, but that doesn't mean people can't bring amendments throughout the process or site, we have the site specific North County piece coming up. It's things happen outside of the traditional comp plan, but yes. And right now I'm trying to think if there's anything east of Campus Commons to Hunter Mill, which there might be one tiny section.
Yeah, there is some land there.
On the south side of the road that might be closer than 50 feet. But most of it's a lot more than the 50 feet than what's being asked of.
I think good comments, Mark. I think it probably, being able to do something is probably mostly on either side, east and west of Wheelie for a short distance. You move the other way, it's not till you, Brookfield is probably doing a good job with what they're doing, but how much farther west from there with limited amount of redevelopment that you can do? Probably not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think that either side of Wheelie, and then maybe a mention to what Brookfield, they're doing a terrific job with the ponds and the pathway there.
I mean, I guess the point would be that some of this can take different forms along the way,
Right.
and that there are certain areas that have the space to be able to do it, and other areas that are constrained by other elements. And so I just wasn't sure kind of what the thought process was for whether that's a uniform facility or whether it's you can mix and match elements of it as you go along, so long as you're providing safe spaces for pedestrians, bicyclists, and that sort of thing, which I assume is the intent behind this.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you the real intent. I'd like to be able to walk to my zoned elementary or middle school without crossing over Sunrise Valley multiple times because there's not a sidewalk to be had to get our kids safely to school because we're in walking distance. A lot of people are walking distance to their zone school, and right now that's not possible. So as things are being redeveloped to bring that type of ability, that the TSA areas are the more walkable areas, that's the goal.
And that was one of the original design principles for Reston, was that you wouldn't have to walk across a road.
Why you want people to pay for pathways, right?
As they're important to us.
Maybe a few more words on the Sunrise Valley would be appropriate.
Maybe so, but I want to make sure that we're not right now saying though that I don't know that we do want to agree to much flexibility. I think this has been a huge issue for the community, what came in on Sunrise Valley and how it did not add to the walkability or make it feel like an inviting walkable area. So I do want to just be careful that, you're not, you don't think that we're allowing for great flexibility throughout.
I guess what I'm suggesting is that this is the point at which the difference between an urban design and a suburban design intersect. And that the urban design, as reflected in the adopted urban design standards for the TSA, says you put a 8-foot landscape amenity panel behind the curb coupled with an 8 to 10-foot sidewalk up against a 4-foot building zone, and that the distance between the curb and the face of the building is 30 feet or less. And that's reflective all throughout the TSAs on Sunset Hills Road, Sunrise Valley Drive, et cetera. And seemingly we're asking for a different condition along some unspecified section of Sunrise Valley Drive. And I'm not certain why that merits a different treatment than any other area within the TSA in this particular instance. And that's the piece that I'm just not 100% certain. I get the fact that one got adopted at Campus Commons. I don't know what the impetus is, I'll say, to have that spread for 3 miles along that same section of the road when we're not doing it anywhere else.
Well, why not? I mean, this would make it a much more walkable, livable community to have something like this. So why would you be opposed?
That's what we want here.
I guess what I'm suggesting is that there are adopted urban design standards that were built into the current comprehensive plan and have been applied and still apply, notwithstanding this, that have a different form of development. And so you would have at a minimum conflicting standards.
That's okay.
But I also think that the urban form is what I'll say has been agreed to from the beginning, starting in 2002 when the TSAs were first put into place. And we can quibble as to how well it's been executed, but I think the question is, if we're reverting to a suburban standard in the way we're designing pedestrian and other elements, it's a sea change from the way it's been done for the last 20 years.
Well,
maybe
Mark,
that's
there's
the
always
objective.
exceptions and variances on any development. You're certainly aware of that.
I just want to.
I don't follow, Dennis.
Just look, I understand your point, but I think the larger point is that the overall community that we're trying to create here will have certain services, and if that means a slight variance is required, it can be done and work with the developer and make it work. but not to discount it off the top with it saying that we can't put it in there.
Well, and I think, Dennis, that's what I was suggesting earlier, right? Which is that you're gonna be flexible in how it gets implemented across the expanse of Sunrise Valley Drive, because you've got different circumstances and different conditions that come into play. And so if that's what you're suggesting, I'm in agreement with you.
I don't think it is, no, especially when we're talking about putting in a cycle track. You can't have, one
You
block.
can't go back and forth.
Yeah,
Another way. I mean, come on.
Right.
Look, I get what you're getting at, but we are saying that, that I think it was in there before. Sunrise Valley was supposed to be a linear park. This is the view. Jim pulled up the picture. It's doable. It happened very close to a metro that it's going to go in. So I don't see why it wouldn't be something desirable to have for as much of Sunrise Valley as the plan covers.
And as Michelle just denoted, we have some pictures, and we've been asking for several, meetings for some more pictures. So please keep that in mind as we get to the next version of this chapter. We will need to start, visually seeing it, and this is a very important chapter for visuals. So this is the visual that we're talking about right now.
Jennifer? I'd like to interject here on Sunrise Valley in specific. Mark, I think you know what we're railing against, and that is near the junction of Reston Avenue and in the Sheridan area, where we were supposed to have street trees. We were supposed to have all kinds of stuff. And when it got built, zippo, zilch, nothing. And we have this hulking buildings that feel like they're going to fall on the road, and it's not pleasant to walk there. And we don't want that anywhere else. We want shade from trees. And, somehow when that project was approved, there were trees in all of the drawings. When it got built, none survived or were put in or were eliminated in site planning because there were conflicts with utilities or God knows what all. But that cannot happen again. This is, we're supposed to have this linear park all along there. It's to everyone's advantage that it be cohesive. And people have talked about the cycle track. You can't stop and start that. Then what do the bicyclists do? So this is what we're trying to do. I think we can solve this. And I'd like to take the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Jennifer, we have like 3 hands that popped up. We have Charles Colby, Chris Daniel have been patient, but also Lynn Molston. So Charles, did you want to go real quick?
Oh, hi. No, the plan looks great. I just wanted to check, we were before way back, there was on the screen, there was some blue line. I think it was around the golf course. Were those just suggestions by Bill, or are those revisions that we'd be voting on?
You mean the blue line that's in the final, the non-red line version? That's just a link to the guidelines. Is that what you're speaking?
Is that what it was? Okay, I saw.
Yeah, that's just it's a hyperlink. It's a hyperlink to that actual document that has been developed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Michelle and I like links in our documents so that we can get to where, so I don't know if that will stay in the document, but you'll see when we create documents, because we do all this research, we tend to like to link to what, we're referring to. So we'll see if it stays. I can't guarantee it would, but that's what that blue line is.
Thank you, Charles. Chris Daniel, then I saw that Lynn put her hand down, but
yeah, I wasn't sure.
In the spirit of brevity, I took my hand down because I'm going to go.
I wasn't sure if we were following Robert's Rules of Order or if someone actually had an amendment they were proposing to Jen. Otherwise, I assume we're voting to approve it as submitted, because otherwise all that discussion is nice, but unless some substantive actual direction is given, then there's nothing to vote on other than the plan that was given to us. So I want to vote on this. So sorry, I'm done now.
Yeah, me too. I want to get the vote out. All these ideas are fine, but let's face it, all those musts that Mark was worried about, they're there because the parks that were supposed to be done around the Sheraton, all the grass was not done. If you don't have a
Never been
shelter,
delivered.
it's
Yep.
not going to be done. Let's get the vote out.
Okay, and I guess folks, I just want to check with Mike Jennings. Mike, did you have any final
Yeah,
comment?
when was the last version of this we saw? Was it in June or was there something in between?
In between, I thought it was 2 weeks ago.
No.
We had the summer version, and then we had the subgroup that made the edits, and then I presented the edits that the subgroup had decided on, and then I incorporated them into this document, and that's what you have tonight.
Okay, so since we haven't really seen this document in its entirety with the subgroup comments, basically since June, I'm really against voting for this. Also because there's a whole section on playgrounds in this that was taken from the community health, which I had commented on, and now they're showing up here. So I'm just gonna, I know we're gonna vote. I'm just voicing for the other task force members. I just don't think it's really fair for us to be asked to vote on something that we haven't really seen since June. Thank you.
I just want to make sure, Mike, that you understand I came back a couple weeks ago and presented exactly the changes that the subgroup decided on, and
Well, that's
how,
different than
how
seeing
they
the
would,
document.
yeah, and how they would be incorporated. So
It's different than seeing the document. I'm just,
sure.
Thank you.
And then I will send around after this again this document, which has all these pictures that I keep flipping through to make sure you guys understand this is what we envision would be incorporated. And, you know, please to reiterate again, you know, pictures tell 1,000 words. So the more pictures we have, the better understanding we'll all have. And with that, Jose, unless you have more hands.
I think Jan has her hand up, but I think she's not ready to vote.
Well, she threw the motion, so.
Yeah, so I guess Jan and Mike, did you want to clear hands real quick before I start tallying? Okay, so let me just double check. No one's hands up. Okay, so I guess all those in favor of giving initial task force approval for the Parks and Open Space, keep your virtual hand up, or if you have your video on, I can look at that as well. So I'm gonna give folks at the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'll do. I see Michelle's hand. I see 11 hands. 10 plus Michelle's physical hand. Did I count that right?
Yes, you did.
Yay. All right, let's clear hands and we'll do those not in favor and we'll do abstentions as well. So Bruce, I see I think you had your hand up for 4. Okay, it's clear. And Jennifer, I think your hand is now it's
Her
down.
hands up, yeah.
Okay, so everyone at the, everyone against, put your hand up and I'll count at the count of 5. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I see a lot of things. I see 7 hands. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay. So everyone clear hands and I'll do abstentions. So Mike, Shane, Jan, is that a new hand?
No, it should come down.
Were you were 4, right? I counted you 4, Jan.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So abstentions, keep your hands up. I'm gonna count at the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I see 1, which is John Mooney. So 11 for, 7 against, and 1 abstention. Did I miss anyone? Did everyone put up their hands? I think everyone did.
Did you count Jan's hand as against?
No,
I
Since
didn't
it was
see.
still up?
I
I
didn't
had
see
it
her
down
hand.
by then. I had it down.
Yeah, I didn't count hers as.
Okay, great.
I think hers came on afterwards. Okay, John Mooney, I got your I got your hand. So any, I think that's it, Jennifer. I think we got 11 for, 7 against, and 1 abstention.
Okay, then I would say this chapter's in your hands now, Jose. To whatever
Pressure's
it is we're doing with it next.
pressure's on, Jose.
Sorry, but I'm
No
happy
worries.
to
No
move it
worries.
past me.
Thanks
Okay.
so much.
So
I am
Jennifer, yeah.
happy to if anyone has language tweaks, like John Mooney said, he has a few language tweaks here and there that don't create a substantive change on what we just voted on, to at least do that last round of edits and send it out.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Supervisor, I think we got through the first 2 items. I know it's 9:08 on a
All
Monday.
right. Jose, put that agenda back up there.
Yeah, give me 1 moment. Let me get the presenter role real quick.
Okay. I do appreciate the task force moving forward on this. I know we still have, and we're going to be talking about the process here in just a minute. Okay, so number 5, process for finalizing task force recommendations. I had a couple of questions. This was something we had talked about, gosh, 2 or 3 months ago, and didn't come back to the task force. The general approach that we're working under, and then we'll go into details, and then let's see if there's consensus on some of those details anyway. But the general approach is we're getting initial task force approval, like we did tonight just now on the parks and open space. We still have, and Jose, can you scoot down just a little bit? We still have those 6 items to go that have not gotten initial task force approval. Basically, the process we've been working under assumes that there would be more detailed county staff feedback on the language after initial task force approval is obtained, and then that would take somewhere, I know it's been different times, 2 or 3 months of review by county staff. So one of the things that I do want to talk about is what kind of, and then after that, we talked about public outreach that is still necessary and critical before this goes into comprehensive plan language. So my question, St. Clair, for you, we do have, and Tammy's done a great job pointing this out, we do have another process that's going to be starting up sometime later next year. Actually, I don't know if you have, St. Clair, information on that SSPA process that Jennifer mentioned earlier. When I know it still has to come to the board for approval.
Yes, Rosa Alcorn. So as you know, right now there is a process going on to review possible changes to the SSPA process. So again, that process is still underway. There was a community survey that was being done, I think, that close today. There's going to have to be meetings with the Planning Commission and board or their land use committees to look at, look at possible changes and to finally determine what changes are going to be made. Right now, the goal is that the final determinations on the new process would be completed somewhere around early to mid 2022. And once whatever that new process was determined, there's no set time, but shortly after that, they'd be looking to initiate the the next SSPA process.
And St. Clair, as part of that SSPA process, at least for every type of process that I can remember in Fairfax County, there's typically a district task force. Is that correct? That's what we always.
Currently, that is the case, but of course, again, there's still discussions on what the process is going to be, so we don't know what changes may be made. But currently, yes, that is part of the process.
So I would like for this task force to finish up before an SSPA task force was created. So, and especially if any of you end up doing the other one too, I you might want to join me in that.
Walter, I've got a question about SSPA and the comprehensive plan. I'm
Yes,
just wondering,
Lynn.
is there a precedent or a process that is in place that says, you know, if the comprehensive plan, if a specific parcel is determined in the comprehensive plan that has just been released or approved by the Board of Supervisors, is there a limitation, or, I mean, are they able to come back and put in for an SSPA if that parcel is included in the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, typically, if there has been a process where site-specific reviews were done, you wouldn't want to do that again, you know, immediately thereafter. In this case, with the very few exceptions, I think we've stayed out of site-specific recommendations. So that said, that will likely be part of the discussion about screening criteria for the SSPA process. And so we'll have to figure that out. Going into this process, you know, it's pretty clear to everybody that we weren't going to be going into site-specific recommendations. So in general, I understand the need to have something that we do at least every 5 years or so, the opportunity for a landowner to suggest a change. But that said, we've not yet worked through screening criteria, and I will be active in that discussion on the board.
Okay, thank you. I just know with land use in particular, we are looking at specific parcels and making recommendations. So
yeah, that's true, Lynn, but we didn't tell the community that, you know, tell us any changes you want. So that's
right.
Yeah, but you're right. I don't want to limit anything you're doing, Lynn, in terms
Thank you.
as you go through the process. So yeah, there's maybe a little bit of overlap, but hopefully not too much. So the question then, so it looks like we're probably looking at the end of next summer, maybe early next fall, for the initiation of a new process. So, you know, I think we do need to keep that in mind to try to finish this off, well, really the middle of next year. And I don't mean just the task force, but, you know, overall planning commission and Board of Supervisors and public engagement. So I have received requests from a couple of organizations for more information about what's been discussed, what the task force is doing, including RA. I mean, frankly, they wanted to talk in January. I said it's probably too soon, but you know, maybe February. So one question, is there any concern? Well, frankly, I would like, as staff is doing their deeper dive review on the initial task force recommendations, I think it would be helpful, at least for Reston organizations like RA, maybe like the Reston Chamber, to get feedback from, have the task force get feedback from those organizations on the initial draft. So anyway, does anyone have any concerns about that? Okay.
Wait a minute.
Representatives
Tammy?
from the chamber here. There's
Go ahead.
representatives from RA and from the chamber on the task force.
I'm just telling you the request that I've gotten.
You get, no, and I'm just saying, I'm just a little confused when they have representatives on the task force to write it, if they then think that they should have additional editing power. It just seems it doesn't make sense.
No, Lenny,
Representatives.
Yeah.
all we're suggesting is reaching out to our constituent, the other members of the chamber, and gathering some kind of meeting where what we've done so far is presented to them, because there are no documents on the website or anything for them to look at. So we'd like to.
They have representatives with the documents. I would hope that you're reaching out and getting feedback, right?
We are waiting till we have, substantive sections that we can do that. But the supervisors talked about having some community meetings, and we thought we could have a community meeting with our chamber members.
Yeah, and Mark Looney, let me, John Mooney, let me pull you in. I know RA has wanted to do a meeting sooner rather than later. I think in a similar vein, because there are other folks in RA that want to be updated on sort of what the issues are, and frankly, start to get up to speed. Do I have that right, John?
You do, Walter. Basically, while I am a representative, the main representative from RA to this task force, and Larry is the alternate, and obviously Jennifer's on it also, and she's a board member. Nevertheless, the resolutions of the Reston Association on who may speak for the board are fairly strict, and I certainly have given input into the formulation of all of these documents, but the reason I abstain is because I'm prevented by our resolutions from taking any position which is a new position not already approved by the board. And that is the limitation that I've been operating on as far as votes. So we have updated, Larry and I have updated the board monthly. We've had only one major update in the spring. And what we want to do is, now that some of the flux is settling down and we have more and more settled chapters, we want to have a briefing of the Reston board, Reston Association board, with Walter there, so that the board then will be in a position to vote on how they look at the various chapter drafts. Is that clear?
Yeah, John, thank you. And let me just say, as this has been a group effort, I would ask that frankly, some task force members who have been active in writing this participate in any such meeting with RA or the chamber or anyone else.
That'd be great.
Tammy, thank you, by the way, for bringing up process multiple times.
You're welcome, Walter. We have A through F and number 6, which are the remaining major chapters. We covered community health today. So that's well on its way with a few tweaks. And hopefully we're going to get affordable housing and transportation. And John Mooney, can you guesstimate, do you think that you will be able to finish transportation next Tuesday?
Bill Penniman and Gary and I, who are the drafting committee, are meeting. Both Gary and I wrote a proposed final draft. We're going to reconcile that, and we believe that we can have it in time for the November 21st meeting, with at least 5 reading days in between.
Okay, thank you. So And then
November 21st?
He
December.
meant December.
Okay.
December, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
He's thinking turkey.
And then we have affordable housing. David Vanel, how are you doing? Do you feel that you're going to be ready on the 21st? There's a reason I'm asking this. I'm trying to get a longitudinal calendar in my head here.
No, I'm in the process of gathering the additional information per the task force's request, and I would suspect that that's going to take till the end of the year.
Okay, so my point that I'm making gently is land use cannot finish before we have these 6 chapters, or well, land use is one of them, so 5 other chapters. And what I'm trying to figure out, Walter, is how long are we seriously thinking that this task force will keep meeting for 6 more months?
It's a good question, Tammy. Before we come back to that, let me bring up one other chapter, which I've had a conversation. Michelle, I don't know if on equity, I know you've had the pen on that and had some thoughts about how that might be best addressed.
I think equity would be great to do as a wrap up after land use, and either right before land use or right after, because we already covered the equity topics, and what we want to do really, and what we said we were setting out for our goal also was to see that they are incorporated into the other chapters in an interwoven way. And so I think that would be good to do after we finalized transportation, community health, and affordable housing.
Could I ask a question, Michelle? Are you anticipating that being a separate chapter or introduction and interwoven in the others?
It's written as a separate chapter. There has been some discussion that it could be more part of the introduction. I think that it would be right now it is written as a separate chapter, and so let's see maybe how everything turns out, and if that's where it fits and it works. But this was a discussion of the whole group, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But I know that there are some who would like to see it as a whole chapter. To be very frank, I'm agnostic. I think that if it is done well in the rest of the plan, then it will stand out. If it's done also, is very clear in the intro, but those are 2 big ifs. So yeah, Chris, do you want to add anything? Or I don't know if Reston is on the call, or Alvarez, or anyone else.
Hey, Michelle. I think I agree with, if we knew some of these other ones remaining for approval, then we could possibly pull more language out of the equity section, and it could become more condensed to very specific items that didn't blend themselves across others. A kind of similar item that was brought up with the community health section, that if there is some cross-cutting items that perhaps have already a clear focus in another section. But I've kind of been an advocate that the equity section should stand on its own for some principles, because they're just kind of, and that whether that's in the introduction, and that's fine, that works for me too, because we've kind of turned it into principles. But I would like to see, I think, particularly affordable housing, which I think is one that is really going to help inform whether or not there's language in there that needs to leave and just kind of tie into that section.
Okay. Thank you, and I apologize, Tammy, for diverting your question into a longer discussion, but I thought it's very helpful for everybody to have that conversation.
And equity is so important to Reston. Yeah. It's part of our DNA. So whether it is, that's irrelevant. The introduction is going to be short, and if the equity is its own chapter, wonderful. My concern is, frankly, endurance, to keep doing this with back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I think that's why we cut and we voted today. We're going to get on with this. But I want to know from your perspective, are you saying now when we get these, I'm going to say 6 chapters in, that the staff is then going to take 2 months on top of that, and then we're going to have public outreach?
Yes, that's actually been the process all along. Remember, we get informal feedback from staff
Yes,
until there's interim task force recommendation. And then at interim task force recommendation, then we get the written comments from staff. Now, some chapters actually have had, written comments sooner. And some of them have gone, a little more condensed. But yeah, staff tells me they need 3 months.
3?
Yep.
Wow.
We'll have to say in transportation, the transportation staff has just been, in my mind, John and Bill can chime in here, but very good at working with us and getting back to us. And so we have their comments.
During the 3 months, and sorry to cut this off, we're at 9.
No, please.
We're talking about, we hope to God, we will have our chapters in by February. The staff is going to need March, April, and May to look it over. And then in June, we're going to have public outreach. And how many applications are going to be approved in those 6 months that are lining up at the door for January 2nd to come in? So I'm concerned. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about longevity. I'm feeling like a mouse in a cage with a cat, and being sweating. It's not funny, Walter. We're exhausted.
Wait a minute. What are you talking about?
We're trying so hard,
Yeah.
the civilian volunteers, to do the best work we can.
Yeah.
And we've gotten some written comments that were high level on the eco chapter, for example. And, we're done. We're going to present that in January for the task force to vote on it.
Okay.
Then what the staff does with it beyond that is up to the staff. But we can't keep coming back and forth. We just can't do it. This will never get done. And it'll be the 2023 master plan, not the 2021. And I have to be very sincere and very concerned. We are wearing out. You can see people are dropping off. So
may I ask one quick question though, because while I do agree with Tammy, as enjoyable as these Monday nights have been, I would like one back every now and then. But in all seriousness, what is the expectation though too, once staff makes their edits? Do you intend to, and then you intend it would be staff makes edits, then the staff edited version goes to the community?
Well, that's what we had talked about before. But frankly, the timeline is extended, and we are bumping up against the SSPA a little bit. My thinking is, frankly, to have some initial community engagement before written feedback comes back from staff. Again, from RA, maybe from the chamber, maybe there's another organization or two out there, to get feedback during that 3-month period. And then after, and I believe the task force, and if you don't want to do this, it's okay, but I think the task force wanted another shot after staff had made their comments. So that's probably 1 or 2 meetings in, I don't know, May or whenever, something like that. And then after that, I think that's when the broader public outreach and engagement needs to happen. Because then we're looking at gearing up for a planning commission and board of supervisors public hearings.
So Walter, on that schedule, then, if I'm hearing you, if it's, call it February to May for the staff 3-month review, then public input, then task force, I'll say refinement or whatever is going to happen after that, and then a staff report and a planning commission and board hearing. I mean, that process alone is 90 days, give or take, from the time the task force cuts it loose. I guess the question is there a way to accelerate that process so that, just based on what you're describing, you're talking about third quarter into potentially fourth quarter of next year before you would get to the board. And A, that overlaps with what I understood St. Clair to say was the SSPA process. And B, I'm with whoever it was who said I'd like a Monday night back every once in a while. I guess the question is there a way to maybe have the task force's work be completed when it's handed over to the staff? And then to the extent that we wanted to, as the staff is preparing a staff report and a recommendation to the Planning Commission and board, if we wanted to provide additional input into, or I'll say commentary on the staff report, is that a way to try to merge some of these processes together to where we're not looking at September, October, November of next year before it gets to the board? So that maybe the 3 months that the staff is working is preparing their staff recommendation that sits either alongside what the task force came up with or incorporates some of what the task force had, but our input at that point is limited to the giving input into the Planning Commission as opposed to giving input into a final task force product. Is that a way to shorten that time frame, I guess?
Does anyone have any immediate thoughts on that? And it is 9:33.
My immediate thought was two things. One is I thought that the staff would look at it, they would bring it back to us for a quick look, and then we'd send it to the public in that order. And the other thing is the written summary. I think we should be thinking as we complete these chapters about a written summary to send to the public so that they don't have to wade through all of this material, because they're not going to. Thank you.
This is Chris. I'll just say that staff looked at the heritage sections, had a meeting with me, showed me their comments. I gave my acceptance back for 99% of them, and it's probably sitting just so. I think it has to be happening concurrently if we're going to get, anything back. So I'm hoping the ones we're voting on, staff is getting with those groups and we're doing that back and forth. But if we're starting to stack up a deck of cards, I get that why Walter doesn't want to come out with not all the things to present. So I think Jan's point about a summary is helpful, but I think the suggestion about finding a way to shorten that in at least some way that we know what the comments are that are being provided, I think that's the key thing that I always took away, is we wanted to know what staff was saying in response to these versions we were voting on. At least that's what I would want to know, because that's what helped me understand with the heritage section.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that to Mark's point, I know that staff typically makes recommendations to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission looks at it and makes the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. But it was my understanding that this plan was going to be coming from the task force, that this is being written by the task force. It's not a staff written document.
Yeah.
So I may be wrong.
Well, frankly, it depends on what the task force comes up with and if and what the community reaction is to it in large extent. So hopefully, most or much of what you're writing will end up in comprehensive plan text. There may be some other things, and this was mentioned earlier, that are really more implementation issues. That Jose has already started a list of implementation motions for me. Thank you, Jose. That will go along together, as well as, frankly, monitoring and data collection issues that will need to happen. And finally, there may be some things that, frankly, are that ultimately I may not go along with your recommendations, and there may be some things that that are going to be addressed that way as well. So I'm envisioning in my head sort of a massive table that issues task force recommendation, included in the plan, yes or no? And then if not, then implementation motion, monitoring, or address somewhere else. I'm thinking of a table like that, so that everything that you've done is not, well, frankly, everything you've done is addressed. And so it's not lost. So that's my thinking in terms of, but I am very concerned that we start getting public feedback and we get this beyond just this circle of folks, because it's been a while.
So Walter, in that vein, I would then request, I think that Mooney will be ready with transportation next week. Health has now been out there. It will be out there 2 weeks. I mean, I'd really like to just get the edits from the task force on health. We've had it enough time by the end of this week, and bring that back next week for a vote.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer.
It's been out there a few weeks now. And
Thank
then,
you,
because I was hoping David Vanel could do affordable housing next week and we could give a little bit more time, but ours is ready and done. So maybe, David, could you bring yours back at the very first task force meeting of the year?
I believe so, yeah.
And then after that, we can do urban density and land use at this second meeting. And at the third meeting, we wrap it up, finishing out our intro, which might include equity, or it might be separate, but we could have both of those topics.
So we wrap up into January.
Yeah. And the only way that is going to work is people have to get your edits in between task force meetings.
Okay. Thank you.
You gotta submit them.
Okay. Any concerns with anything that Jennifer noted? Okay.
That's an awesome suggestion. Thanks, Jennifer.
Not Jennifer, but I do want to say nothing that the staff is going to see is going to be radically different from what they've been seeing for months. So I don't get how we went from 2 months, which I thought was excessive, to 3 months. So can you, on your side, and Walter, work on that so that we can.
And the staff does anybody from DPD have anything right now they want to say on that, or is that something you want to talk about, and maybe we could come back next week?
I think so. Let them think about it for a week.
Okay.
This is really crazy to me. We're trying so hard and have been working so long on this that to now have it roll to 3 months when none of it is dropping out of the sky as new stuff is incomprehensible. So thank you.
I do want to make one request, though. I really think we need to finalize exactly how this is what our role is after that last meeting that Jen just said, because look, if it's going to be completely rewritten by staff, I mean, some people are putting a lot of effort in, and I would hate to see people's written words also just feel like they got deleted. And so I don't know what to do about that, but I am a little worried that the plan lends itself to staff rewriting it or presenting something different, and then we don't really have a way to respond, or if we do respond, that it won't necessarily be addressed.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. And I do understand that. But I also appreciate the role that staff plays in actually administering the plan, at least doing the initial analysis when rezoning applications come into the system. They're the ones that actually do the cross-check of what's in the plan. And I want to make sure there may be some policy differences that staff has with ultimately, the task force recommendation, and ultimately maybe with my my motion. But I'm also very concerned that at least for an implementation capability, that it's actually written so it can be implemented. So, but Michelle, I do hear you, and I think in all these examples we're talking about coming back to the task force. And also, I'll just note, and I said this before, we are talking, or I did say as well, that I would like for this group to continue in a monitoring role, so that not every Monday, but maybe once a year, or so that, as data are collected, and this group would be provided an update on the monitoring issues and implementation issues that were noted when the plan is adopted. Okay, let's do this. It's so late. I appreciate everybody staying late and extending on this, but we will put together something for review by the task force on process. Be thinking about it, but we'll get that out before the next meeting and finalize that. But Jennifer, I think your suggestions on dates and topic areas, I think can help move us forward. Okay, any final thoughts before we wrap up? All right, thank you. The stamina is unbelievable, this group. So thank you very much for everything that you're doing. And everyone try to get some rest this evening.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank
Night.
you. Good night.